Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian. I am co-founder at Ruby Reese and at dognutrition.ie, and I will also be your host. We are going to jump into a really exciting topic in just a second. Wanted to give everyone a little update on how we're getting on with our new venture, dognutrition.ie, where we're consulting clients on their dogs' diets, and it's really exciting, and it's so nice to I suppose build that special relationship with our clients and their dogs, because at Ruby Reese we have a brand, and we've certainly built up friendships and really good relationships with lots of our customers. But it is just that little bit different when working with the service, and particularly when you have consultations and you dig into the pain points, I guess, that people are having in and around their dogs' diets and nutritional needs, and it's really rewarding to build those types of relationships, and it's something we really appreciate. I don't think we knew what we were missing out on when we were speaking with all of you that are trainers and groomers and behaviourists, and the rest of it, who have also built amazing relationships with their clients. So that's a really nice part. It's really positive, and it's obviously so lovely to see dogs progressing and hearing how they're doing through the couple of weeks that we're working with them. Typically they're all on their own individual journeys, but it's so nice to hear about the little successes that they're having along the way, some of them even big successes. So I just wanted to kind of share my appreciation for how much we're enjoying the consultations and that side of business. And if anyone is considering setting up a service where they're really going for individual work with clients, I highly recommend you give it a go, because like I say, it's super rewarding. So we actually had a lovely topic for this week's podcast. So we were speaking with Lea from Harmony for Paws dog training in Dublin, and we wanted to talk about getting our dogs to calm down a little bit in different situations, to settle, I suppose, in different scenarios. So without further ado, I would love to invite you now to listen in to the chat that I had with Lea. Lea, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing this evening?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me there again.
Thank you for coming back. Yeah, much appreciated. Would you do us the pleasure of introducing yourself briefly for anyone that might know you yet?
Hi, I'm Lea. I have a dog training and dog behaviour company in Dublin that I've had for almost 4 years now. And I am specialized in the treatment of separation-related behaviors and helping owners through diagnosis for pain and discomfort through the Dynamic Dog program, which is doing gait assessments, gait and posture assessments, to help figuring out what could be bothering the dog, even though we can't see it. And then we can send that to the vets and get closer to get a diagnosis.
Amazing. That was brilliant. And your training business, for those people that are on a second screen at the moment and want to type it into Google, that's Harmony for the number 4.
Yes.
Paws, right?
Yes, it is.
So people can have a look for that as well. We'll put a direct link anyway into the show notes. So we chose an amazing topic for this evening. I'm really excited to get stuck into it. We wanted to talk a little bit about settling training for dogs. So why is settling training in the first place important as a tool for us with our dogs?
I would say it is a very important skill because you can and you need to use it for pretty much every aspect of your cohabitation with your dog. Because obviously, when you have a dog that you love, you want to go for walks with them. You want to take them to nice places with you. You want to go on holidays with them. And you also want to have friends over in your house. And you want your dog to feel relaxed and happy in all of those situations. The thing is, dogs don't come to the world with that skill, sadly. So it is something, like obviously some dogs are calmer than others, but it is a skill that we have to teach them and that we have to reward over and over and over again in every possible situation that we can think of, because this is the only way for them to actually learn.
Yeah. Yeah, super important. And I suppose we have to touch on the topic as well. Like, we can really influence our dog's behaviour in a way, can't we? When we either hype them up on one side or we calm them down on the other, right? It can kind of influence almost like the behaviour and then the consequences of that as well,
yes,
you know.
Definitely.
So I suppose for anyone that's listening in at home when they're thinking about this, you know, if you go up to a dog with loads of energy and say, "Oh my God, how are you?" and you really start to build up the energy and move your arms around, you're going to, you know, bring a lot of energy into that situation, regardless of whether the dog perceives that as positive or negative. And the same with maybe more calming strategies, right? I'd imagine that if you come into a room and you're very calm and there's not a whole lot of drama about you, it could potentially be quite calming as well, right?
Oh yeah, that's for sure. And if at the same time the dog's owner is rewarding them for being calm, you're making the chances of the dog being calmer way bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. So we thought about an interesting strategy for this podcast. I suppose we had a lot of feedback actually on Instagram. I put out in the stories the question, you know, do people have any specific questions about settling strategies for your dogs? So we've taken little tidbits of that information that we got from people and the questions they had, but I'm also going to enrich that information in conversation with you, so that we can do, like, not consultations, because every dog is going to be an individual, but have like some scenarios that we could maybe try to help people out with some ideas. This, I suppose, our session this evening is more to think about you know, getting the thoughts firing in people's minds and give people some ideas, right?
That's
so
for sure.
We've got some scenarios that are a mix of fact and fiction, but we'll pretend that they're real scenarios for the case of this. Brilliant. So will we get started off in one of the scenarios?
Yeah, just one thing to add first would be that all the little training things that we're going to go through here, we will assume that before the dog has been checked for potential pain and discomfort, that their needs are met, and that there isn't anything else that's bothering them and stopping them from being successful. So obviously the little things here don't necessarily apply to every dog that we can see. And it's really important to keep that in mind, because some training solutions work for one dog that won't work for the other one, and other way around.
Yeah, definitely. Treating every dog as an individual, which we love and we hear on this podcast so often. So important. And like you say, each tool is just that. It's an individual tool in the toolkit, but there might be lots of others that a trainer might be able to work with you and your dog with as well. So launching into the very first scenario, we wanted to talk about settling at home. Yeah. So for our case study this evening, we have a female staffy. She's just around 2 years old. She's quite large as well for her breed. So she's quite a large staffy, particularly for a female, which makes her humans a little bit more concerned as well about any aggression, and wants to make sure that she's a very well trained dog, particularly for visitors. Now, she's recently started barking quite a lot when the doorbell rings and when visitors come, and I'm sure loads of people listening in will have you know, experience with this as well, but she's got a lot of loud barking and lots of emotions when there's kind of maybe new people entering into the home. So how would we look at this situation about how do we get this staffy to maybe find it easier to settle in home in these situations?
Okay, so in that kind of case, I would start to try decomposing every little bit of the visitor's arrival. And I would use a few training skills, like probably mat stealing. We'll go into more details a little bit, but probably having a little mat where the dog could settle, or having a little area that's maybe with a playpen or a baby gate or something, and having loads of enrichment in that part of the room. So the guests could arrive in peace. So that probably would be one way to look at it. Sometimes it's not always possible to do this when you have guests, but if it's people that they know very well, a very easy way to diffuse the situation and remove a bit of all the excitement, like we'll assume this is excitement here and that the dog is very excited because she's happy that she's going to have friends over. So in that situation, probably going for a little walk with the people and like having them walking parallel to the owner and the dog, and like casually walking around, even 5 minutes. It doesn't need to be very long, but just to bring down the excitement a little bit, having loads of yummy treats so they can scatter them on the ground for the dog to sniff. The reason for that is it's not just to feed the dog, it's just that whenever we're scattering treats on the ground for a dog, it really lowers the heart rate and the level of arousal. So then the dog has the resources in the environment, if she is obviously able to take a treat in that situation, because sometimes they're too excited and they can't do this. But if she's able to take a treat, putting the treats on the ground for her to sniff, that's going to help her self-regulating. And then the people could go in the house, and then the owners could bring her to her special little area where a bit of enrichment has been set up for her. So that way, instead of being overwhelmed in the hall, for example, because that's something that happens a lot. Like, for example, when people come into the house, we go and they ring the bell, obviously, and then we welcome them in the hallway.
Yeah.
So then it is a very, usually, unless you have a castle, but I don't, it is a very narrow area. And the dog just sometimes, even if it is excitement and they're happy, it just turns into a big load of emotions that they don't know what to do with. So when they don't know what to do, what are they going to do? They're going to bark. They're going to jump everywhere on the guests. They're going to be all over the place. So if instead of meeting in that hall, we meet outside, or we already have the dog set up in another area with other options, they will just choose the more rewarding option. And sometimes a nice lick mat can be doing the trick. A nice snuffle mat with very high value treats. Like if your dog likes chicken, a little bit of chicken in a snuffle mat. And obviously the dog will come and say hi, but then they will choose to go back to whatever they were doing, which is more rewarding. And at the same time, it has the double impact of calming them at the same time.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things that you can start, like this is a bit of a management system, so the dog doesn't end up in a situation that's too complicated. But what would be interesting here would be to start looking at when is the dog getting a bit amped up. Is it when she's hearing the bell? Because if that's the case, then on the side, on a completely different time, you can have, what I would do, I would probably record the bell when the dog isn't at home, so that way you can hear the bell on the phone, but not the roof behind it. And I would start playing it at the lowest volume possible. So what you want here is to notice that the dog has heard the sound. Like the ears are going to twitch, the head is going to turn, there's going to be a little sign. But it's low enough so there's no barking or anything. And then you can reward that.
Yeah.
Like with a big yes, and then you treat the dog, or scatter a handful of treats all over the room and repeat until you can increase the volume when the dog is ready.
Would it be safe to say then, I understand where you're getting at with the doorbell, and it's a brilliant strategy. If it's the case with the doorbell and someone knocking at the door and something that sounds like a knock and barking at the window at people passing as well, then it would probably indicate something different, right? They're not associating the bell with something in particular. It's more that they're like guarding the whole area in a kind of a more
guarding, or sometimes
sense.
it can just be the fact that the bell is the predictor that something's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they associate the bell with either something that's extremely exciting, like guests that are coming, oh my god, my friends, I'm gonna have a lot of attention, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
And then they can lose a bit control over their emotions, because usually what happens, they're like, oh my god, this is so exciting. They get in the house, they're in the hole, everybody's trying to pet them, which is more than fair, because the dogs are extremely cute. So obviously we do want to interact with them. And even if the dog is happy in the first place, the whole thing just becomes a bit overwhelming. And their brain works with associations. So basically, when they hear that sound, it doesn't only mean somebody's coming in, it also means all those emotions might come back. And then the dog is like, ah, a little bit overwhelmed with everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, like this is like the barking at the window, that's a very different problem.
Okay.
Which can be addressed with just a bit of frosted glass stickers on your window, so the way doesn't get to rehearse it.
Yeah.
And like easy as that, sometimes you just give your dog the opportunity to settle a bit more, because they're not on alert all the time and on the watch for the next person that's going to pass and that they will bark at.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm going back now to what you said earlier as well about the going for a walk with visitors that you already know, maybe, or kind of expected guests, let's say. That's a really, really nice strategy, and I love the idea, because I was thinking back to another podcast episode where we were talking about when, like in the dog world, isn't head-on meeting is usually quite aggressive, right? So
a bit rude, yeah, for sure.
Yes. So when and this was about dog sports. We were speaking about flyball, I think, and it's like that. It's a very unnatural type of move for the dogs to learn, because they're almost passing each other head on. But anyway, I guess even when you're walking, like you say, side by side around your neighborhood where the dog's already comfortable, there's loads of wide open spaces, and you're next to each other, you're all going in the same direction. And then when you're re-entering the house, I love it. It's like I suppose from the idea behind it, the philosophy is that you're all kind of going in together. You've already invited these people into your wolf pack, for the want of a better phrase. And look at the
excitement has been diffused a fair deal. Another thing to add in that situation, for if you really want to be successful when you're doing this, I would make sure the dog has a lead that's long enough not to restrict their movement too much, and that they have plenty of opportunities for sniffing, which is why I was recommending scattering little treats if they're taking a treat, because that way it is making it way easier for the dog to make good choices. Because I think a big part of this is giving the dog control and giving the dog the opportunity to make the right choices, and then rewarding them. Yeah,
definitely. And you also mentioned about having the dog having their own space, or kind of a safe space that they go to in the home then when there's visitors, or that they can go to kind of chill out a little bit. This is probably an important tool for lots of people to consider as well, right?
And sometimes it is okay to use like physical barriers. Like, for example, at home, I only use it when we have fosters. But I have a big playpen that unfolds and that can separate a room into two different parts. So obviously we don't just want to lock the dog in a different part. What we want is giving them other things to do in there that would be calming. So that way they can actually start chilling a little bit, even when people are arriving in the house.
Absolutely. So I'm wondering if some of these techniques are going to come up again when we're settling into new places. So I wanted to introduce a new scenario here, and we can always switch between the scenarios. We've got someone that wants to prepare their two dogs for coming. They're very, very lucky, and they've managed to get a vacation home in Ireland, which is impossible. And they want to start going there regularly with their two dogs. So for this scenario, it's going to be a Jack Russell Terrier, a very curious little guy, and a Cavachon, who's slightly less curious, but also loves going on vacation, I presume. And they want to start getting, setting themselves up for success and setting their dogs up for success on going to this new space regularly. How are we going to build up their relationship with this brand new space so that they, they build lots of positive connotations with settling then in this brand new place where there's loads of new things to interact with?
Okay, so the work is going to have to start in their current home and work a little bit on, for example, the ability of both dogs to be in the
Yeah.
same room without necessarily being like bouncing on each other, jumping at each other's face. So the dogs can actually chill being in a room together. So that's very important because if they can't do it at home, why would they do it in a place that they've never seen? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, a very like consistent routine can help a lot with this. Like let's say for example, everybody gets up in the morning, the dogs get fed, they go for their little walkie, and then they have a little downtime, for example, in the room. And it could be like I use a lot of like calming activities in terms of like enrichment for settling skills because for example when the dog is chewing a big juicy bone, they're not jumping at each other and they're not and it is a very soothing activity for them. It can be a bone, it could be a snuffle mat, it could be just a bit of like sniffing for their little treats, things like that. And I would make sure at the beginning both dogs are able to go into different spots within the same room. Actually, for the case before, I talked to you quickly about mat training.
Yeah.
We actually didn't get to develop this because the rest, I think, was a good start. But teaching dogs how to settle on a target, a mat, a bed, a blanket, whatever you want to use. I personally use a blanket that's always been the same since my dog was a baby. And he knows that if I put this down on the floor, this is where he go chill and he doesn't move from there. Obviously, this is not an obedience exercise. It is more of like an indication for him that this is going to be the moment where you actually go do your own thing and you just can chill there and only good stuff are going to happen.
Yeah.
To train that, like there's loads of ways to do this, but what I would start doing, I would have for each dog have a little mat that's not the same. Obviously, they're going to rush on the mat together if you use the same one and they have the same association. And you're going to end up with the opposite of what you're looking for. So I would probably, have this like very specific mat or blanket, whatever that you use. And every time the dog goes on it, I would go and pop them a little treat. Reward this for being on it. And same if you're giving them their chews, if you're giving them like a snuffle mat, something like that, put this in their spot. We're doing this with a mat, but it could be like they could have a special corner in a room that's theirs. And that's you have a limitation of that corner with anything that they can see and recognize. So it doesn't need necessarily to be a mat, but the mat is really convenient. And I'll explain why in the next case, because that's even more important. But having that target and that cue that's telling them, oh, this is where I'm going to go chill. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
To get them to get used to the place a little bit. I don't know how far the people who have asked this are from the holiday house. If they're quite close and there's a way to do little trips just for the sake of the training, I would probably do that. And I would have an accomplice that would go first and just scatter little treats all over the house and in the garden. We're going to assume that they have a garden because they're very lucky people.
Very lucky.
And they're very lucky. They have 2 dogs.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
we're going to assume that they have a garden. So I would just plant a few trees all to encourage the sniffing and just come in with the dogs, probably one at a time to begin with, and just get them to sniff around the house and then leave. And then build up the time that you spend there. So in a new place, that's definitely the way I would address this. Obviously, we have to be mindful of the fact that sometimes if it's your holiday home, it is quite far from your home and you're not going to drive like 3 hours to go in the middle of nowhere just for half an hour and then come back. But bringing with you all the little cues, all the little things that are part of the dog's routine. So like going one at a time for sure, because otherwise both dogs are going to get a bit excited and then they're going to make each other excited. So bring them one at a time. And what we described before, you can actually do this within the home, even if it is far and you're going to stay. Like it's not because you don't leave right away. that you can't do this. So you just go around, let them have a little sniff. One thing that's extremely important when you go to a nice new place, whether it is nice or not, actually, that's really important anyways, is that the dog has had all their needs met. Meaning, if they're extremely excited because they haven't had their walk yet, or it is a very hyper time of the day for them, that's probably not the best time to introduce them to something new. Because obviously we want them to be successful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like for example, this morning we went to the market to get vegetables and we had the dog with us. So usually we wouldn't like too much to bring him to this place, but because it's busy, there's a lot of people around. So basically what we did is that we had a nice walk before, he had a lot of sniffing, and then we went to get what we needed. If we had done it the other way around, that would have been a disaster. Because he wouldn't have had all that energy that was in him when he started the walk. And I don't have I don't have an athlete at home. Yeah. So even with a low energy, but that would have been a disaster, even if he's not the most excitable dog.
Makes
so
a lot of sense.
Little things like that to keep in mind and be mindful of.
And now that brings me to another thought as well, is if they're getting there by car and a dog, loads of our dogs don't travel very well, they mightn't like the car, they might be a little bit stressed in the car, they might even get a little bit car sick. Presumably you don't want to just immediately launch from that stressful situation in the car directly into this new space that you want to make really positive, right?
Yeah, so the maybe walk is a nice walk in the neighborhood, or if there is a side door in the house, just bring the dogs in the garden and scatter a part of their meal, for example, or nice little treats in the grass before you let them come in. So that way they already have a little bit of that excitement that's left their body, and they're more able to actually make good decisions.
Yeah.
But I would be very mindful once, if let's say they've been driving for 3 hours and they're going to stay for the night, I would probably try to arrive quite early in the day. So that way you don't go in and it's bedtime and leave the dogs in a room on their own. That's another thing to be mindful of, even with dogs that don't have any separation problems. Like I know mine, for example, I can't leave him on his own in a place that's not ours. I mean, I can after a few days, but if we get there, for example, let's say we get to the place and then we go shopping and we leave him, that's going to be a disaster. So it's little things that we have to keep in mind, that the dog might not, maybe they will be absolutely fine. Maybe they won't feel that happy if you're just leaving them there when it's a place that they don't know that well, and you need to take a bit of time to show them where things are, to show them what they're supposed to do and all of that. So maybe the first night, if the dog is normally sleeping, let's say, in the living room on their own, maybe be aware that they might not want to sleep on their own that night, and it might be easier for them to have, for example, a bed next to yours, and then you can revert, kind of move them slowly and when they're comfortable. Yeah. But we don't want to create that fear of being in a new place, especially if they're not used to going to new places quite often. We want them to feel confident with everything that's happening. So going at their own rhythm, maybe they'll be absolutely fine, maybe not, but it's important to have an eye on it. And if they're more keen to follow you around, all of that, let them.
Absolutely.
Because they want to explore, they want to take in all the new smells, and before they actually start feeling more comfortable, it might be a day or two, maybe a week sometimes, before they actually start understanding what's expected of them, where they can go chill, where's the nice chilling spot, which is when the mat or bed that you've been using to do a bit of settle training is really, really useful.
Those are really useful tools, and I'm sure loads of people will see situations that they can really use a lot of this information, or little pieces of it that will really suit. And I'm sure people will be also applying this particular situation, not maybe to their own vacation home that they're walking into empty, but maybe to go and visit their cousins in the countryside for a weekend or something like that. I presume, not going into that, not making a whole new scenario out of it, but I presume adding the extra complexity then of new people on top of that to the location is going to also add another layer of complexity and just makes the other steps more important, right?
in that case, maybe meeting the people one at a time and meeting them in a wider space where the dog has the freedom to move around, like the garden, for example. If they don't want to
Absolutely.
go, like, let's say you're going to a house and there's like 15 people in there, you're not going to go on a walk with each one of them. But you can
Yeah.
have maybe one or two at a time in the garden and have them there and let the dog sniff them. And I would be very careful as well not to physically overwhelm the dog, even if they're
Yeah.
asking for contact. Because sometimes they're not really asking for contact. Like a dog jumping up, for example, that could be to avoid being touched on the head. And people are like, oh my God, this is so good. He wants to be petted. And the dog is actually telling them that, no, this is not what I want. I wanted to sniff you.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to avoid that. So being mindful of their space and maybe teaching the new people that, like explaining nicely that the dog might not want to be touched right now. They might want this later. So instead, maybe throw a treat
Yes,
instead of touching them.
exactly.
That's what
That
I
and
do
that
with kids, with my dog, like, because he's very cute and fluffy, and a lot of people are actually, like, a lot of kids walk up to us like, oh, can I touch your dog? So I'm like, thank you for asking. I really appreciate it. He doesn't like to be touched, but you can give him a treat instead. And then they give him a treat and everybody's happy and no problem.
Isn't that such a great way to work the situation? You know, give the kids some treats and say, can you
Yeah.
go scatter these in the garden? We're going to do a quick loop around the block to diffuse some of
Yeah.
the energy, and we'll be back and we'll watch what they do in the garden. That's a really, really nice idea. Brilliant. And now I want to move on to my own my own personal kind of fantasy scenario here, because if anyone knows me, I've got two secret loves that are not so secret, and that is the love of coffee. So we're going to an espresso bar, aka a public setting, and we would like our new Great Dane to learn how to settle in a busy, loud, weird sounds kind of public space, and maybe with people coming and going, and I'm sure attracting lots and lots of attention as well, because a big Great Dane in the middle of the espresso bar. Nobody in the region has seen this sight before. So how can we set ourselves up for success in this slightly ridiculous situation of mine?
Okay, so first thing, what we're going to want is avoiding, especially in the early days, maybe later on the dog will be fine, but in the early days, avoiding everybody coming to touch the dog. So in that, for that, there are little signs that you can get online that say either in training or I need space, whatever it is you want to put on it, it doesn't matter, but just something that says to stay away from the dog. So
Yeah.
that's the first, like, this is a bit of management as well, but if you want to do some training and you walk in there and you have like 5 persons all over your dog, they're not going to settle because this is
Yeah.
really hard and it's a new place. For that specific scenario, this is probably one of the scenarios where the mat training is the most important.
Yeah.
Obviously, before your Great Dane is able to settle on the mat, you're going to have to work on it at home. You're going to have to transfer this in different places. And maybe what you can start doing would be having somebody ordering the coffee just when you get there, and maybe in the first instance having it outside, in the outside area
Absolutely.
where there is a bit more space. So
Yeah.
that way your dog can start chilling on their mat, and they can start like relaxing a little bit without the pressure of a restricted space. Because another thing that happens in those places is that the flooring is not adapted and the dogs are going to slip all over the place. Add to that a dog that's getting a bit excited and they're on ice skates, and the next thing you know, they're all
Yeah.
over the place.
And then there's new sounds as well. The
Yeah.
coffee being tapped out, and the
smell.
steamer going, the smells,
And the smell
there's
of
loads
the
going on.
food, obviously.
Yeah.
So all of that, you have to assume that it's going to be very exciting for your dog. So depending on how chill the dog is, I would probably start with being outdoors. But
Yeah.
even if that's too much, I probably would drive to the place, get the dog out for a nice little walk in the neighborhood, then just go in that area, scatter a few treats, and then leave. And next time you're gonna stay a bit more, and next time you're gonna ask the dog to go on their mat, and reward that before you can actually go inside. And while you're doing this, when you're on the outside sitting area, what you can do, let's say you can go inside when it is a bit quieter, just scatter a handful of treats in there and then leave.
Yeah.
And then repeat and just make sure the dog associates going in there to, first of all, their space being respected, and that people are not in their faces, and that they actually have the tools to be successful in what you're going to want from them. Because obviously, like, and I probably would be very tempted if I didn't know any better. If I see a Great Dane walking in the cafe, I'm going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. So yeah, it is really important to be able to go very gradually before they're actually comfortable in loads of different places. And you're going to have to repeat that in all the places that you're going to go with your dog. To make sure, because they don't generalize skills very well. So they could be fine with the cafe at the corner of the street. But then if you always go there and you only train them to be comfortable in that specific spot, they might not be comfortable in a different one, even if it's a few meters away from there, because it's a different place and the setup is different and they're going to have to settle in a different place. But in a general way, the mat training is a very, very powerful tool, because it shows the dog that they can be on that mat and chilling and they're safe. Which is, one more time, so important, that when the dog is on the mat, they're off limit. People don't walk up to them. It's their safe space, and they can actually relax without fearing. Or sometimes it's not even fear, it's just excitement, but then that makes it so hard to stay on the mat if somebody's walking up to them to touch them. So advocating for them and telling them, I'm really sorry, but right now my dog is in training.
Yeah.
So maybe you can throw them a treat or something like that, but instead of just going and touching them one more time.
Yeah, makes an awful lot of sense. And I think there's two things I love. First of all, the idea of having a rug so that you can, or you know, a blanket so that you can move it around portably to different places, as opposed to it being something that's really huge and a big heavy structure. Obviously it's going to be huge regardless, because my Great Dane is fully grown and he's gonna need a big whatever it is, but at least a big blanket is easy to roll up and put under your arm, whereas if it was more of a solid thing for training, then it would be a little bit more difficult.
I used to have in my bag all the time, you know, those doormats, the one with the plastic bottom.
Oh yeah.
That only works with a smaller dog, obviously. Your Great Dane, that would be a tea towel for them. But those are great because they're not slippery.
Yeah.
And they're quite easy to put in a backpack, and just that could be part of your survival kit when you're going to the cafe with your dog.
Definitely.
But yeah, like a blanket definitely would be the most convenient, especially with a big dog, because you can just fold it in your bag or just even have it in your hands. That's no big deal.
And some dogs can take to it really, really well. Like Ruby's such a diva, she doesn't like sitting on cold concrete. So if we're going to something like a market or something like that, she will choose to sit on a rug, as long as it's at a corner where she can see where everything's going on. She's happy to sit on something that's slightly softer and warmer than just the ground.
Yeah, mine would be the same. Like, there's no way he'd settle. Even in the grass, it is hard for him. We actually had the experience yesterday. We were sitting in the grass in the park because we had a coffee. And even in the grass, if there's no target, that's my own fault. I should have worked on it a little bit more. But I thought having the blankets is... Most of the time we will have it with us, but yesterday we didn't. And then, like, weirdly enough, like, that's so hard for him to settle if he doesn't have that. And then he will eat grass, just roll around. And when normally we put this down, he's like, hey, happy.
Oh, it's brilliant to hear that at least he's really, really happy with what he's kind of gotten used to. And another thing that I really, really loved that you brought up as well is about advocating for your own dog, because I think, like you say, it's so important. And especially, I know my Great Dane is huge, but this fantasy Great Dane's going to get loads and loads of attention as well. So, and they can't even hide. You know, a small dog can kind of make themselves small in a corner, and I know that's not what we like to see. But at least they can kind of, not be seen by everyone. Like, a horse-sized Great Dane inside in a little espresso bar is going to get noticed. So those guys can't really make themselves quite so small. So I think advocating for your dog is really, really important. I also had a creative idea there once. I had to tell someone really wanted their child to have a lovely experience rubbing Ruby, but it just really wasn't the right situation. So I actually told them, I'm really sorry, but my dog has fleas. So it worked. They didn't want to rub her anymore. She didn't have fleas, but in case anyone needs to think on their feet, it's another one for them.
If you're outside, brilliant. If you're in a cafe, the owners might not be delighted that you're bringing fleas into their place. But yeah, I get the feeling. Great thinking. Or telling them they have a contagious disease or something.
Exactly.
Everything is fair in that kind of case. Like, and sometimes we panic, even though you know what you're supposed to say. If you have like different people arriving at the same time, you're like, oh god, like the
and honestly, we're only lying to people because they have an expectation that they should be allowed to,
Yeah.
and we've all had the experience of saying, no, actually, he or she is a little bit worked up right now, and they get really disappointed and think that you're a horrible person for it. So I think sometimes we just have to make these things up, or kind of make half excuses or real excuses for them, which says something maybe about our society. But look, it is what it is.
To be fair, I'm getting really good at I know it's also a different situation, but my dog has a neurological condition that makes touch really sore for him. So obviously hurting people's feeling is the least of my concern when that pops up, like feelings of a stranger, my dog's well-being. Obviously this is the choice is quite easy to do, and you do end up getting a tougher skin, I guess, through that kind of thicker skin.
I think so. And in the end, that's what we're there for. We're bringing them into very human-oriented spaces sometimes, and we need to keep that in mind, that we need to advocate for them then as well. So yeah, it's been so much fun going through all these scenarios. I've really, really enjoyed it. I think it added a lot of colour to the situations, and I had loads of fun making up details to some of the real and more fantasy-filled scenarios. So thank you so much for going through them.
I have a question for you though.
Yes.
When are you getting a Great Dane?
When am I getting a Great Dane? When I can put in all of this training work, which is as you know, I'm very busy with podcasts and lots of other things. But when I can dedicate some time to do amazing mat training and have them be an exemplary part of the family and the dog community, that is when I'm getting my Great Dane. Okay. But I don't think it's going to happen in 2025. But maybe sometime in the near future. I also think that Ruby is mellowing a little bit as she gets older.
Yeah.
I don't know if she'd love a second dog in the house right now, a permanent fixture. I think that could come with time. She seems to be mellowing a little bit, and she loves big dogs. She's my sister is a Bernese, and they play together, tall and small, and of course she's the boss. But so we're no strangers to giant breeds in my family. We grew up with St. Bernards as well, so love giant breeds. It's just now is not quite the right timing, but I think that is going to happen.
Cool.
And when it does happen, I'll be begging you and loads of the other trainers around the country to come and help with all sorts of things. It's going to be the most overanalyzed dog ever. So
for sure,
that's definitely the case.
Can't wait.
So the last thing that we wanted to point out, I think, and potentially, well, everything's been important, but one of the most important things is, I think, if people are struggling with some of the topics that we've spoken about, it really, really makes sense to speak with the trainer, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely, because every training plan that we come up with is designed depending on the dog, on the specific dog's needs. Because obviously, we need to have a look at the dog's body language. And if we want the training to be effective, we need to be really well able to read this body language. Because sometimes if we're trying to implement little bits of training, but then the dog isn't really comfortable, we're just making the whole situation worse. And if we're
Yeah.
lucky, sometimes something that's been working for a lot of other dogs, maybe that will work, but that might not. And even with the best of intentions, it is really important to have a professional's eye on the situation and make sure you're actually giving your dog the tools to progress and to learn things in a very comfortable way and in a setup that will allow them to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like we've built up this world that's very, very human oriented. And now we're expecting dogs, and our expectations are growing and growing for having dogs fit in and settle and live comfortably in that world. And I think that's what we're talking about when we're talking about settling, right? It's helping our dogs feel comfortable in very human settings, because you're never going to be talking about, oh, I'm struggling with settling when we're out in the forest on our own,
for sure.
having a walk or camping or something with just the immediate family of the dog. It's never going to happen. It's about the human world, so it's
Even
really,
though
really
it is
interesting.
important
Yeah.
for a dog to learn how to do nothing, even in a setup like the forest. Let's say you're stopping to have a picnic. You do want the dog to be able to chill while you're having your picnic and not jumping on the table, like trying to knock you over, all that kind of things.
That is true.
So it is also, like settling in general
relevant.
is so important. Anyways,
Yeah.
I think that's the full conclusion, really.
Exactly, absolutely. Thank you so much, Leah, for coming on and sharing. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, and I really look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chat soon.
Bye.
And once again, a huge thank you to Leah for joining us on the podcast this week for an absolutely exciting topic. We really, really enjoyed that chat. At least I did, and I'm pretty sure you did if you made it this far. If you'd like to see a little bit more of what Leah gets up to with Harmony for Paws, you can check out our show notes, where you will find both her and our social media handles and websites for Harmony for Paws, for Ruby Reese, and for dognutrition.ie. Additionally, you can get in touch with us on those social media platforms if you would like to hear about a very specific topic that you're really curious about, or if you feel like you could deliver a topic, then please do get in touch with us, because we're always open. Without you, the listener, we would not have a podcast, and without our guests, we certainly would not have a podcast. So if you're interested in listening to or speaking about any specific topics, let's make it happen. Drop us a line on one of our social media platforms, and we would be delighted to try and get that in the pipeline. We will have another episode for you next week. Until then, wishing you a lovely week.